She wore the same navy blazer to every case, same measured steps to the defendant's table, same quiet voice that never rose above what was necessary. For 3 years, no one in Riverside County Courthouse had given Elena Rodriguez more than a passing glance. Until the summer heat forced her to remove her jacket and the judge spotted something on her forearm that made his gavel freeze mid-air. A faded tattoo. The kind you don't choose, the kind you earn. Welcome to those who left a trace. As you listen to this story, have you ever wondered if someone you know might have a secret past? Tell us in the comments. Who's the most ordinary-looking person around you? Maybe they too have an untold story like Elena's. And if you believe real heroes live quietly among us, don't forget to subscribe so these stories can reach more people. Riverside County Courthouse was the kind of place you'd find in California's small towns. Wood-paneled walls, creaking floors, an old ventilation system that made everyone sweat during summer months. Big cases weren't tried here. Small crimes, traffic violations, occasionally a murder. Elena Rodriguez had been working here for 3 years. Elena arrived at the courthouse every morning at 8:30. Same brown briefcase, same black shoes, her long black hair always pulled back, minimal makeup. Nothing drew attention, nothing was excessive. Her colleagues called her Quiet Rodriguez. She was a good lawyer, but unassuming. She followed the same routine in every case: arrive early, review files, listen to her client one last time. During hearings, her hand was always on her jacket button, as if she was protecting herself. Her colleagues didn't find this strange. Everyone had their own habits. Prosecutor Morrison cleaned his glasses before every statement. Judge Patterson always held his gavel with his left hand. Elena just wore long sleeves. But careful observers would notice. Her posture, for instance, back always straight, shoulders tense, as if she was constantly on alert. The way her head turned reflexively when a door opened. How she constantly checked exit routes. Bailiff Jackson had known her for 5 years. Rodriguez is strange, he told a colleague once. Never relaxed, like she's always expecting something. Elena's briefcase also contained unusual items. Where every lawyer carried pens, files, and notepads, Elena also had small medical supplies, bandages, antiseptic, emergency pills. I like being prepared, she'd tell anyone who asked. She was different during court recesses, too. When stepping out for coffee, she'd scan corridors, note security camera positions. She preferred stairs over elevators. For exercise, she'd explain. Prosecutor Morrison had joked once. Rodriguez acts like she's CIA or something. They laughed then. But nobody knew how close that joke was to the truth. Early in her 3rd year, some people began noticing unusual things about Elena. The first clue came during a security issue at the courthouse. One Tuesday afternoon, during a hearing, the courthouse fire alarm began sounding. It was later determined to be a technical malfunction, but everyone panicked in the moment. People jumped up, started rushing toward exits. Elena didn't move. She just sat, listened, identified where the alarm sound was coming from. Then, she slowly stood up and walked toward the nearest security exit. She wasn't hurried, but her route was perfect, as if she'd memorized this building for years. Bailiff Jackson watched this. She didn't panic at all, he noted to himself, like she'd experienced this before. Another day, during a hearing, the prosecutor's briefcase fell and its contents scattered. When Elena bent down to help, her movement style was striking. She didn't crouch, didn't bend her knees. She took a tactical squat position, back straight, without losing environmental awareness. She bent down strangely, Judge Patterson had thought, like she'd been trained. The most striking incident occurred during tension with courthouse security. A drunk defendant lost control after hearing his verdict and lunged toward the judge. While bailiffs tried to intervene, Elena reflexively stood up. Her stance was combat position, feet shoulder-width apart, perfect balance, hands half closed. It lasted only 2 seconds, then she collected herself and sat back down. But those 2 seconds stuck in observers' minds. "She's had combat training," Secretary Williams had whispered. But where? When? That day was July's hottest. The courthouse's old air conditioning system had long since given up. Windows were closed, air wasn't moving. It was past 3 in the afternoon, and the courtroom had become an oven. Elena's client was Mark Stevens, a simple drug possession case. Caught for the 3rd time. This time he'd go to prison. Elena was trying to make the best possible deal. When the hearing started, everyone was complaining about the heat. Judge Patterson loosened his tie. Prosecutor Morrison removed his jacket. Bailiff Jackson unbuttoned his uniform. The courtroom was generally trying to cool down. Elena still wore her jacket, forehead sweating, hands moist, but she didn't remove her jacket. She was explaining final consultation notes to Stevens. "Ms. Rodriguez," said Judge Patterson, "please remove your jacket. You'll faint in this heat." Elena hesitated. "I'm fine, Your Honor. Thank you." "I insist. Nobody wears a jacket in this heat." Everyone in the courtroom was looking at her. Stevens curiously, Morrison with surprise, Bailiff Jackson with concern. Elena had no choice. She slowly removed her jacket, first the right arm, then the left. Under the sleeveless white blouse, both arms were now visible, and on her left arm, from wrist to elbow, was an old faded tattoo. Judge Patterson adjusted his glasses and looked more closely. Prosecutor Morrison dropped his pen. Bailiff Jackson held his breath. That tattoo wasn't just a tattoo. It was an emblem, a symbol, a very special mark. Delta Force's classic insignia. A mark that only the most elite military operators could carry. Silence fell over the courtroom, the kind of silence where even air conditioning noise becomes audible. Everyone was staring at Elena's left arm. The tattoo was old and faded, but still readable to an expert. Judge Patterson had been in the legal profession for 30 years. His father had served in the Korean War, his brother in Vietnam. He recognized military symbols. And this symbol wasn't an ordinary tattoo. Delta Force, Special Operations, the unit where only the most select, most trained soldiers were accepted, and the number of female operators was very, very few. "Ms. Rodriguez," said Patterson, his voice trembling, "that tattoo." Elena quickly put her jacket back on. "Youthful mistake, Your Honor. It's not important." But it was too late. Bailiff Jackson approached. He was a former Marine himself, knew military insignia very well. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "that's not just a tattoo." Elena looked at him. There was now a different expression in her eyes, the expression she'd hidden for 3 years. Hard, controlled, commander's gaze. "No," said Elena. Her voice changed, now more authoritative. "It's not." Prosecutor Morrison stood up. "Your Honor, should we postpone this hearing?" Patterson placed his gavel on the table. "Yes, 10-minute recess." As Elena gathered her files, Jackson approached her. "Ma'am, how many years did you serve?" Elena turned to him. 8 years, 2008 to 2016. "Deployment where?" "Afghanistan, Iraq, Niger." She paused. "And a few other places that are classified." Jackson respectfully bowed his head. "Thank you for your service, ma'am." Elena smiled, her first real smile in 3 years. "Thank you, Marine." During recess, Judge Patterson was alone with Elena in his office. He'd closed the door, wouldn't let anyone else in. Elena sat across from him, no longer having anything to hide. "Elena Rodriguez," said Patterson. "Is that your real name?" "Yes, sir. I never used a false identity." "What did you do in Delta Force?" Elena was quiet for a moment. "Hostage rescue operations, counterterrorism, intelligence gathering." She paused. "And some things I can't discuss." Patterson leaned back in his chair. "Why did you leave?" "I didn't leave, sir. Medical discharge. I was wounded during an operation in Afghanistan. I still have shrapnel fragments in my left leg. It prevents return to combat duty." "And why did you choose law?" Elena smiled. "I wanted to continue protecting justice, just a different path." Patterson nodded. "Is this information relevant to this case?" "No, sir. Stevens's case has nothing to do with my past," but she stopped. "But?" "Stevens's situation is similar to many of our returning soldiers. PTSD, adjustment problems, self-medication. I went through the same processes. Maybe I can help them better." At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Bailiff Jackson entered. "Your Honor, I'm sorry, but I checked Ms. Rodriguez's service record. Operation Crimson Dawn, Afghanistan, 2014. You were the team leader of that operation, weren't you, ma'am?" Elena's face became serious. "Where did you get this information?" "I was in that operation too, ma'am. 2nd Marine Division. You extracted us. There were 4 of us surrounded, no way out. You and your team came and rescued us." Jackson's eyes had filled with tears. "Ma'am, I owe you my life." Elena stood up, approached Jackson. "You don't owe me anything, Marine. We all came home. That's what mattered." When the hearing resumed, the courtroom had a different atmosphere. Bailiff Jackson's gaze toward Elena had changed, and he'd whispered to other personnel. Word had spread. To Secretary Williams, to security guard Martinez, even to the cleaning staff. When Elena took her place, she was no longer an ordinary public defender. She was a Delta Force veteran, a war hero, someone who had served in one of the American military's most elite units, saved lives, been wounded, and quietly returned to civilian life. Judge Patterson picked up his gavel. "We continue with Mr. Stevens's case." But when he looked at Elena, there was a respect in his voice that hadn't been there before. Elena stood up. Her jacket was no longer buttoned. The tattoo was visible, her identity known. "Your Honor, I have a special plea bargain request for my client." "I'm listening, Ms. Rodriguez." "Stevens served 8 years in the Army. 2 deployments, Afghanistan, Purple Heart recipient. He has a PTSD diagnosis and is receiving treatment. Drug use is a result of war trauma, self-medication." Patterson nodded. "What's your proposal?" "Instead of prison, a specialized drug rehabilitation program with Veterans Affairs support. A program designed for military personnel." Prosecutor Morrison stood up. Under normal circumstances, he would object, but he'd learned who Elena was. "No objection, Your Honor." Stevens looked at his lawyer in amazement. "Rodriguez, how do you know these things?" Elena turned to him. There was now a different light in her eyes. "Stevens, you're not alone. We all came back, we all struggled. The war ended, but sometimes the war continues inside us. I went through the same path." The hearing ended with Stevens being accepted into the rehabilitation program. He wouldn't go to prison. From that day forward, Elena changed. She was no longer afraid to remove her jacket. Her tattoo was visible, her past known. She specialized in veteran cases, defended soldiers with PTSD, started a support group for female veterans experiencing war trauma. That's what real heroes are like. They serve quietly, heal secretly, then help others. Elena Rodriguez walked among us for 3 years, as a lawyer, but in reality she was still a warrior. Only the battlefield had changed. Now I ask you, have you ever encountered someone like Elena? Someone who seemed ordinary but carried an extraordinary past? Someone who continued serving in a different way? Share their names in the comments. Tell their stories. These are the people who left a trace, not with loud declarations or demands for recognition, but with quiet strength and continued service. They remind us that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear business suits and carry briefcases. But underneath, they still carry the same courage, the same commitment to protect others. They just found a new way to serve. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe to Those Who Left a Trace. These stories need to be told. We'll see you in the next one.